Welcome to the Gravel Lot, the place where bikes are for everyone.
The Gravel Lot podcast is presented by Be Free Ride Bikes Apparel, providing a fully customized cycling apparel experience to provide you and your team the attention to detail and personal touch that you deserve.
And also brought to you by Grimpour Brothers Coffee, offering handmade coffee roasted weekly in small batches to give you the finest quality coffee to start your day. Choose their subscription service and earn your free bag of coffee today.
Also by BioWheels Fit Studio and Workshop in Cincinnati, Ohio, offering you a full host of bike fitting services intended to provide the cycling enthusiast with the most efficient, comfortable, and sustainable bike fit they have ever had.
And by the Ritual All Natural Skincare, providing small batch, handmade chamois cream, custom blended for your team or shop right here in Cincinnati, Ohio. Contact us today to learn more.
And by Hand Up Gloves. Great gear, better times. Providing a wide range of apparel for bikes, snow sports, and golf in multiple designs and fits to let your personality shine.
Our goal with the Gravel Lot is to inspire cyclists of all stripes to ride bikes, share their story, and have fun. We love all bikes and anyone who wants to ride them. So no matter where you sit on the spectrum of bikes, we'll always have a place for you in the Gravel Lot.
And now, the hosts of TGL, John Woolry and Doug McClintock.
Hello and welcome back to the Gravel Lot, the official podcast for all things cycling. I'm John, that's Doug. I think I'm pointing in the right direction. And we are so glad that you found us. Here at TGL, we love storytelling, and above all else, we always think that you will have a home here in the Gravel Lot, no matter where your ride has taken you. So whether you are a new or an existing Pebble, welcome to our show. You are all pebbles in the Gravel Lot.
To our home, which is a show that lives on the internet in ones and zeros.
Doug's second floor, my basement, whatever. It's podcast. There's no rules in podcasting.
None.
So if you guys like what you hear today and believe in what we are doing, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, share the show with your bike friends. Just do all of those things to let the internet know that this is something you want to keep hearing each and every week. So with that out of the way, let's get into things today. Leave your comments below as we go along. I'll be able to read them as we go, possibly interject them into the show. And if you want to, you can hit the link in our show notes, check out our website, hit up our Etsy store to see some of our merch, or you can go support TGL on our Patreon account.
Yeah, so why are we using Patreon, right? Why are we using this model? Well, TGL is a passion project for John and I, and it is about telling stories and sharing the experiences around those events and stories, and that hopefully make us more well-rounded and more compassionate people because we're connecting with the things from those stories.
Us and you guys.
Yeah, well, right.
Not just us.
So, yeah. I mean, granted, we get a lot out of this because we get to talk with all these awesome people, and maybe you don't catch every single episode, which is a shame, and you should catch every single episode, and then you'd be as well-rounded as John and I aren't. But it's kind of in our own ways. But what's great about this is that it is for bringing those experiences to you to consume and understand and learn and grow and maybe get a different perspective. But it is not inexpensive. And it is, without a doubt, very time consuming. Yes. So Patreon is how we've decided to kind of make this possible and help us do other things like launch other shows and content creators that we feel passionately about their projects. And we really think that we're providing something of value for you each and every week. So we'd love for you to head on over to our Patreon and become a patron of the show. Any level you would like, we would just like to have you on board so that we know that the Pebbles are helping us bring the content they want to hear to them. Well, what do you get from that? Well, you get our undying gratitude, as always, that comes basically free of cost, even if you just download the show.
Yes.
But you also get an inside look at upcoming guests, exclusive content that we have only for Patreon supporters, and basically anything that John and I cook up along the way. Who knows, maybe down the road a Discord server or something where we can have ways to interact with you and give you something you just can't get on the open and free market of the internet, as it were. So if you want to, John, you had something? Yeah.
No, I was just gonna. I mean, if you look back on our history, we have Real Talk episodes. We have 3 questions in the Gravel Lot. We've cooked up a lot of different ideas. So I think that that location is not going to be any different when it comes to those sort of like, hey, let's try this.
Try this, because we'll float it with you first, right?
Yeah.
We'll float it with you first. So if you want to send questions or feedback or anything, regardless of if you're a patron or not, use any of the social platforms, contact form on our website, or our new text/voicemail/heckle number, which is 513-400-5577. Again, 513-400-5577. Call, leave us voicemail. If you're my hater and you want to call, please do. I would love to have you air your beef on my voicemail.
I like how you say one. There's only one.
Well, there's one for sure, but like there's one for sure, but like there's probably more. So come on, if you think you're that one, get in. But please do send all your ideas for upcoming guests. We are booking the next several months of shows as we speak, and we're looking for women and people of color and people who are doing diverse and interesting and divergent things in the world of cycling, because we want to talk about people who are making change in their communities. That's what we're about. We love talking to people who are doing that, and that is why we are excited to continue to bring this to you. So with that out of the way, what we got to ask. John, how was your ride?
It was excellent. So for you guys just following, or this is your first episode, last week I was on vacation. We pre-recorded an episode.
Well deserved.
Yes, pre-recorded an episode and ran it with Christopher last week. Amazing conversation. When we're done here, go listen to that or go watch the YouTube stream of that conversation with him. But my wife and I went to 30A in the Gulf in Florida. I guess we'll call it Floribama because it is like it's up in the laces of the boot. I like to say that it's not like legit Florida. But the Gulf of Mexico is amazing. So very much needed for my wife and I to get away. So we did 4 days there, spent one night in Montgomery, Alabama on the way down, and did a lot of the Equal Justice Initiative things on Sunday before heading down to Florida. If by chance you're ever going through Montgomery, Alabama and have a couple hours, I highly, highly, highly encourage any of you to go expose yourself to these things and give them a chance to sink in, because they are incredibly impactful. The Freedom Museum is the most emotional piece of installed artwork that I have ever been able to experience, and that is the 9/11 memorial included, which brought me to tears. So highly recommend those things. Florida, it was the beach, it was relaxing, we got sun, I got burnt, and then I peeled, went through that whole cycle of life.
It's like
Then
a cicada. You're like a cicada, John.
Yeah, exactly. It was about the same lifespan too. And then we spent basically 2 days, basically start to finish, in New Orleans, and did all of the things you're supposed to check off the list according to YouTube people. And for anyone that wants to know where I went or what my favorite beignet is, hit the comments. More than happy to respond to you at a later date, but we're not going to argue here because my choice is right. And I will fight you if you disagree with me. So
That's
we can
fine.
Fight on the internet about it.
John, you're willing to fight on the internet.
Yes.
I appreciate that. That's good. About this issue only.
Well, that's where everything gets solved, right? Fighting on the internet is where everything gets solved.
Sure. We've never had a problem with that.
No.
Always.
What
always,
about you, Doug? I was on vacation. I was checked out. You were holding it down here in Cincinnati.
No, I was not. I basically just enjoyed myself. Got some mountain biking in, but really this past weekend, long weekend, Memorial Day, very important day for a lot of members of my family with veterans, and there are definitely some folks in our family who remembered this period of time, but also just a good time to connect with friends. And I was able to go and spend time with friends or family every single day this weekend. Everyone's vaccinated, and it was awesome. Got to get some sun and not get burnt, because that's not how I do things. But get my base in. So I'm ready to turn into brown bear for the rest of the summer. I'm ready, John. I'm ready.
I guess my only advantage is I got a jump start on not having tan lines this year, because normally I have like white shirt and then brown arms, red neck. I mean, let's be real. So I actually hurt my tan lines, because I had some pretty sharp tan lines that I was working in, because all my kits are the same. Like all the shorts are the same length, all the jerseys are the same length. So I was rocking a pretty solid sharp tan line that's now
No, blurred. Well, it's okay. Now at least you aren't completely pale
Well,
and
it
like
was
people don't
for
get blinded.
yeah, it was for a hot second. What's that? The Neapolitan ice cream. Yeah,
Right.
I've
Yeah.
like nailed that for a hot minute. It was good.
Strawberry on
Yeah,
top.
it was good. Yeah.
I love it. Well, without any further ado, I think it's time to bring in this week's guest. And joining us this week is Karen Jarchow. Among her accomplishments are mountain bike wins, well, initially across the United States and eventually the world. But more important than the results and her long list of accomplishments in that field, she has found countless ways to share her love of the outdoors with others and has used those experiences throughout life's ups and downs. And with that, we are very, very excited to hear some of those stories today. So, Karen, welcome to the Gravel Lot.
Thanks for having me. It's great to chat with you guys.
It is awesome to have you. I am hoping that at some point in this process, we will have a Piney cameo. Piney is Karen's dog, and I'm sure will show up at some point, has been entertaining us in the green room. And
Well,
I'm sure we'll swing by.
He really took over the green room, if we're honest. I mean, it really became about him because he put himself about as front and center as you can get.
I love it.
Yeah,
I love it.
It was outstanding.
As you know, in the Gravel Lot, if you go to the website, you know that everybody who has a show involved with what we're doing, all of their animals are very important and listed as the board of directors. So we are all about animals on this show.
They are the decision makers here on TGL.
Well, they at least control things.
Yeah, Piney got his zoomies out though, so he's already.
Oh, good Piney. He's just chilling. He's just relaxing.
Well, that's good.
Yeah.
So, we are super glad to have you. We're excited to chat with you. Lots of stuff, and you've got a busy next week ahead of you, and we'll touch on that for sure. But let's lay some groundwork for the Pebbles, our valiant listeners, and kind of discuss a little bit about your origin story, because everybody has one, and for us it's always important to think about, hey, how did people get to bikes and whatnot. But where did you grow up? Like where did you grow up, and what were your kind of interests as a kid?
Yeah, I kind of love that question because I had no introduction to cycling as a kid, besides riding the dirt roads I grew up on. I grew up in a farm in a small town in Minnesota called Laverne, and my sports growing up were your typical basketball and softball. I was had two older brothers, and I just kind of would replicate the sports that they did. Mm-hmm.
I think that's common, right? So you were the youngest?
I was the youngest, yes.
Yeah, and you're like, okay, well, the boys want to play baseball, so I guess I'm going to play softball.
Yeah, it's like the rut gets kind of built, and you just follow along because you're just doing what they're doing.
Completely. And also growing up in a small town in the Midwest, like our options were pretty limited. So you kind of just follow suit with what your family does.
So you mentioned riding dirt roads, but we talked a little bit about this in the green room. Like it was you weren't aware of like, oh, I'm doing this thing that everyone's going to love in 25, 30 years. Right. But it was more just to get where you were going. Like the bike at that point was really kind of secondary to all these other things that you were doing.
Yeah, and I mean, if looking back, I mean, it was really, as kids, it was your freedom, right? Like you didn't have a license yet, like, and living in the country, you know, most of your friends are pretty far away. So it was my conduit to like be social and to have like that freedom of kind of, you know, doing whatever I wanted.
Well, we didn't all have cell phones then either. So you were like, I'm going over to Bob's house and I'll see you later.
Exactly.
And where you went from there, no one knew. They weren't tracking you on your iPhone.
I have to say though, my grandpa, when I really got into like riding my bike into town, which now looking back, it's not that far out of town. But as a kid, you're like, oh, it's so far. And he would follow me because he was afraid, you know, like young girl riding her bike into town all by herself. So he was my sag man.
It's kind of awesome, actually.
Yeah.
I need a be
Yeah.
done. I need a be done. Quickly.
Yeah.
Water,
Right.
sticky bottle.
I need ice cream money. Can I have ice cream money since
Yeah.
you're
That's
here?
more, that's more the pace for sure.
So you grew up there. Were like was like college in there, or did you like move away from the local area and get exposed to bikes outside of that kind of environment?
Well, so I went to school also in Minnesota, but that's actually when I discovered like cycling as a sport. I was I went to school for athletic training, so that's kind of when I made the decision to follow academics versus sports. And so at that point, I was like, well, I'm not playing sports anymore, but I still want to be active. So that's when I got my first bike, which was a mongoose that quickly got stolen. I was a sandwich delivery girl via bike, and it got stolen one night. I'm sure I didn't lock it and just left it somewhere. But then I bought my first real bike, which was a Gary LeMond. And I would ride all the bike paths and around campus. And I can still remember people like would ride up next to me and ask if I needed to ride somewhere, as if like, why is this person riding their bike? Which is funny because Minnesota is like a very cycling friendly place. But that was my first introduction to cycling as a sport.
So let's take a minute and acknowledge this bike kind of in the sphere of your world, because my wife's first road bike was also a Le Mans, and to this day it's still one of the prettiest bikes I think that either of us have ever owned. Hers was like this classic light blue with the black down tube stripe with the really nice script Le Mans logo. What do you remember from that bike?
Mine was more like a midnight blue with that beautiful cursive logo. And I guess I don't remember like as many specifics about the bike versus just like the efficiency of that bike compared to the bikes I was on before. So
when you have a crappy like
mongoose.
like, and I'm not.
It's just a mongoose. You don't need to put the qualifier on it. When you
okay,
have
you're right. All right. No.
A bike at a certain price point. How's that?
That's what I'm driving.
We are bike positive. We are bike positive here on the Gravel Lot.
Yes.
Yeah, you're correct. And I don't mean to say that the C word. But when you have a bike that is of lower specifications and you get on something that's a little bit nicer, that has like nicer running gear, it is amazing how that like you're like, whoa. Oh, these things that I didn't think were possible. Oh, it shifts correctly or whatever. That really helps you bridge that gap. So you're out riding around and getting exercise because you're in school, you're doing that stuff. Was cycling as a racing scenario even on your radar at that point? And were you at University of Minnesota?
Yeah, University of Minnesota, Mankato.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Perfect. Was like cycling as a sport on your radar? Were you like, oh, maybe I could do that? That would be fun to do. Maybe I should try that.
No, not at all. I didn't even know it was like a sport to compete in. I mean, growing up in Laverne, Minnesota, that wasn't necessarily something I was in my periphery. And not even in college. Like it was just a way to, cope with all the stresses of school and get out and explore a little bit. But never once did it cross my mind that it would be something that I should pursue competitively until I moved out to Colorado.
Well, and let's give a little bit more background here. Again, this was from our green room conversation. You kind of grew up around, as you said, what the older kids were doing, but also your dad was into working on race cars, and you grew up in a very, very different household than the kind of classical family that we think of that grows up, living bikes and getting their kids into bike racing early. So like you grew up very similar to me, where I didn't realize it till I was almost 30 that like, oh yeah, you can race bikes. Duh, why you can race anything. Like you can race lawnmowers. Of course you can race bikes.
You can race lawnmowers.
So which kind of leads me to this question is like growing up doing, again, kind of following that channel that was already built by the other folks in your family, like going out to college was really your first opportunity to figure out who you were and what you were into. So What for you personally, what was that kind of experience like of being able to discover all of these new things?
It's like being a kid in a candy store. Like there, and especially taking it a step further and like where like what I was exposed to in college and what my new environment was and the new opportunities, and then move out to the mountains in Colorado. And I'm like, I want to do all of the things. Like all of these sports sound amazing. Sign me. I started rock climbing. I started backcountry skiing. Dabbled in some river, climbed 14ers, like anything somebody was doing and they asked me, or I asked if I could join and they said yes, I would go do it. So it's like growing up with like a very beautiful, simple life, and then being exposed to more and more, I'm just like, sign me up for everything. I want to try it all.
So if you're presented with that many opportunities, like this is my problem is I'm like, oh, my mother always laughs at me. She's like, how the hell did you ever get into X or Y or Z? I was like, I don't know. I read about it on the internet or whatever. Cause I was on the internet in the 90s. And I was like, it looks interesting. And so I did some research. I've been reading books. Like there's a plethora of opportunities. How did you get to, oh, bikes are a thing that I can do in a different way? Because like, you could have ended up being like, I'm going to go climb Everest, right? Like that could have been the draw for you. You certainly had the opportunity in Colorado to explore those things. Why did you gravitate to this space and how did that roll out?
Yeah, so I worked, so my background is sports medicine, and I worked medical crew for Race Across America when I first moved to Colorado, working in a clinic up here. And that's when I was really exposed to cycling as a sport. And I was crewing a 5-woman relay team. And I had a broken leg at the time, which is another story. But so here I am, like kind of crippled, taking care of these cyclists. And I was just like, man, like, I want to be that, not this, like taking care of them. And so through that experience, I became friends with the local women who were on the team, who are both were professional cyclists at the time. And that's another thing, like living in this valley, everybody is like a professional at whatever sport that they're in. But you would never guess it because they're also, just love the sport that they're in and getting other people involved. And so I feel really grateful to have that type of an introduction into the sport. But anyway, so those two women, one woman in particular, she had an extra bike and extra gear, which were both too small for me. And my leg was still broken at the time, which is another story. But she would take me mountain biking every Wednesday at 6 a.m. And like, I just fell in love. Like the first ride, I was like, where has this been all of my life? Like this sport is the best sport in the world. Meanwhile, like my fibula is not connected at all. It's still broken in 2 pieces. And like, I can remember like descending and having to like clip out and descend one-legged and being like, well, this sport's so fun. Like it hurts so bad, but that must just be normal. And
wow. Oh wow.
Yeah, so that so through doing that and like meeting other people up here, they friends were like, well, you should try racing. And so I did. But my first race, I actually got spine boarded my first race.
Oh geez.
Yeah. So I was a beginner and my fitness was really good. At the time I had 0 skill whatsoever. So I would pass all the beginner men on the climbs, and on the descents, I'd get yelled at and pushed around a little bit. And so on the second lap of this race, I was like, well, that kind of sucked. Like, apparently I just shouldn't use my brakes this next time. Just not hold people up.
I mean, that's one strategy. Like, and trust me, I employ that one frequently and dicey results.
Yeah. apparently you need some skill to back up that tactic. And I didn't have those at the time. And I hit a sage, and sage always wins. And flung off my bike and got knocked out. And the sage to this day is still growing in 2 directions.
Nice. So you left. So
The
you
same
left an
one?
impact.
I left an impact.
Yes.
You go back and visit it every once in a while and be like, you say,
Like I made that. I did that.
It
That's
is
me.
pretty funny.
you
It's
got a plaque. Got a
And
plaque.
especially because like we live in a pretty small mountain town where people like to remind me often of that experience and compare like where I started to where I am today.
So okay, so I kind of want to go back to that a little bit because you kind of sped through that a little bit, but I want to go back to you were riding bikes and you said you were delivering sandwiches for it's one of the sandwich places I don't go to.
Jimmy John's.
Yeah, well,
This podcast now not brought to you by.
right. He kills wild game. I'm not a big fan of that.
Okay.
Anyway,
Well, I didn't know that.
regardless,
He employed me briefly when I first moved to Cincinnati, so it's fine.
whatever. Regardless, so you're riding bikes around and you're figuring out kind of okay, this is a little bit bigger than I thought it was, and then you have the experience with Ram. But what can you go back to that first mountain bike ride and what that because you described it like this is unlike anything else that I've ever experienced. Where has this been my whole life? Like, can you dissect that feeling a little bit more as to like what about that experience was so different than anything else that you had experienced up to that point? Because you're getting towards you're done with college at this point, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So you got a pretty good book of history of experiences to play from, and this is like where has this been my whole life? So kind of talk us through what captured your mind and your heart about that moment.
Yeah. So, I mean, leading up to that, most of my endurance experiences, I was on the road bike a bit. So, you're typically with other people around cars, around like, a lot more noise per se. And then the other sports I played were very team sport oriented that, you had a field or a court and that's where you were. And mountain biking is you in the trail. And the effort needed to like get out there is a lot different than the effort needed in the other sports I've done. So I would also get this sense of like, I really earned this and like this sense of accomplishment and this different type of effort, like anaerobic effort. Granted, like now I'm at, 7,000 to 10,000 feet. And especially the time of day that we'd go, because we'd always go really early in the morning. So like you'd see animals in the sun, and it just was a different way to connect with nature. Like I've always really appreciated nature growing up on a farm, and our family holidays were always to like our family cabin up in northern Minnesota. So it was, I've always been a proponent of connecting to nature. So this was a way of like meshing like, effort, like physical effort with that connection to nature. And it just was, I don't know, it's hard to explain because I just loved it. It was just like pure love for the sport.
I understand that connection. I lost it for many years. And the moment I had it back, I was like, what have you been doing your entire, like you left this thing behind and you used to love it. And the moment, because it's intangible, it is a feeling of freedom. It is that feeling of connecting with that thing and saying, oh, wow, I'm doing this. I'm propelling myself through this. And you can do it as fast or as slow as you're capable of doing it. But that feeling still remains. It's kind of amazing in that way.
And I like that you touched on, Doug, you used to do Dawn Patrol. And I like that Karen, you touched on like the time of day is the most beautiful hikes or rides that I've ever gone on have always started before the sun came up. There's just something magical. Like it sounds cliche to say that, but there's just something magical about that transition of the forest being alive with the wildlife, the sun coming up, the water being cool and crisp, the air being crisp, and kind of being woken up by the sun as it comes up. There's something magical about that experience in and of itself, and being able to be party to that is really special on its own. Not even factoring in the experience of mountain biking or the things that you're seeing on a hike or whatever those things are. It's like those two things combined create this like very strong ball of energy that I can see being very, very important. I just suck at waking up that early in the morning, so it's really difficult for me to do.
Same. I couldn't agree more. I'm not a morning person, but I'm always grateful. This past year, I got back on skis again, which has been really fun. And the people that I've toured with, they all start at like runners and skimo people. Like, I don't think they like to sleep because they always they start at like 5 a.m., like 5 to 6 a.m. And so it takes me like so much motivation to do it, but I'm always grateful I did it afterwards. Cyclists, like I think cyclists in general like to sleep.
See, the problem is if you got to start at 5 or 6 a.m. for, I don't know, mountain biking, skiing, or any of those things where you got to go out someplace, like you are starting at 4 because you got to like get your stuff
Get there.
Oh yeah,
a whole bunch of things and you got to do stuff. Like that's a whole process. Like
totally.
it's not just being there at 5. Like when Dawn Patrol starts at 6, it's like this has been an hour of prep and I needed to get coffee and eat.
Right.
So you parlay this falling in love with bikes into, like, for lack of a better descriptor, a career of riding bikes. Like this has been a thing you've done for quite some time, and it wasn't just in the States, it's been all over the world. And you have accomplished so many things that people can point to on a result page. Just Google Karen Jarchow.
Yeah.
Jarchow.
Tons of interviews other people have done. We don't need to bore you guys duplicating that content. You guys can go Google her name and go find all of the things that she has done and the things like that she's accomplished.
And she's
way more
badass.
than we can imagine.
Yeah. Way more badass than John and I's imaginations could be.
Right.
If we thought about it.
Yeah. Because we don't have fitness and we don't have talent. Like it's the perfect combination for both of us.
It's great.
There's no expectations. Like it's the perfect scenario.
It works good for us at least. But you had a legit career doing all sorts of stuff, and you've been all over the place. This has brought you a ton of opportunities to travel and experience things. You're still racing at a very high level right now. You're with a top class team, and all of these things are still going on. We'll talk a little bit about what you're doing this weekend, which is awesome. But we want to talk about something that you've been doing about taking the experience that you've had over the past, 10, 15 years and started to pass that on, because I think this is where John and I are really passionate about what we do with the show and also what we try to do in our daily lives. And I know you're passionate about it as well. And that's sharing this, just like someone else shared this with you. You're trying to share this stoke with other people. And you said it before, this was people who are passionate, even though they're at the high level of their sport. You are working with kids. What inspired you to do this? Because I think this is a big step for a lot of people. Like, what inspired you to start sharing your love of mountain bikes with kids? Well,
actually, the thing that made me start it was I attended an industry talk with Rebecca Rush, and this is before, now we are good friends, and I still today consider her one of my top mentors. But in that talk, she brought up the question of, what do you see in the industry that you don't agree with? And the thing that was like more prominent in my periphery at that time was I was seeing a lot of competitiveness in little kids in our valley. And it just kind of struck a chord with me where I'm like, that's kind of backwards to me. Like, I feel like you need to start with a good foundation of just like the love of the sport. And then if they want to compete, like that will naturally evolve from that solid foundation. And so then Rebecca said, okay, well, do something about it. As Rebecca does. She just gives it right back to you. And so I was working with Mike McCormick at the time, who is the race director for the Breck Epic. And he is one of those guys that you are in a conversation and you're talking about things you're passionate in. And a week later, he handed me the constructs of a mountain bike camp in our local community. So the first year was rough because
I love this. Remind me not to get involved in a conversation with this guy because like I am susceptible to that to begin with.
Oh, we are both.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, this is like
No.
so.
Don't
Okay, so yeah, let's pause for a second. So, was this something that he went and drew up, or was this something that was like in a drawer that he had been like, or like people had worked on it and it was like, okay, we don't have the right person to run this, and then he talked to you and he was like, oh, I know who to unload this on.
He had lived in Breckenridge and worked in that community for a while and started a similar program there, but it still was somewhat race oriented. And so he definitely had like the bones of like, how to do this in another community. And and he's just like, I don't know if you've ever met him, but he's just a creative genius too. Like, and so he worked with our local rec district to just have the database of the parents and the time slots available. And that year we had like 20 kids, I think. And then since then it grew to 60 maxed out, 2 sessions a summer. And then just in the past 2 years, I've taken it over completely. And this year we had a wait list of 70 kids.
The wait list was 70. You have 60
bigger than the actual
70
yeah.
kids.
I raised the so this year we have 70 each, 2 sessions of 70 kids per month. And then they're in combination of those 2 camps, 70 kids on the wait list.
Wow.
So I have small groups. Like I've created other programs to help those kids, place those kids. And so now we have like a small groups program too.
So what is this structure of this sort of thing look like? It's a camp, right? It's an actual, like, just like, I'm assuming this is like when kids go to like, I'm going to football camp or I'm going to softball camp, right? Is it the same kind of idea?
Exactly. So how, like, our structure is we run 2 mornings a week, and the sessions are 3 weeks in a row. And the thing that's different with mountain biking, because we get a lot of like families that are used to ski school, and then they want their kids to be mountain bikers. Now they see our program to then go into mountain biking. Mountain biking is much more physical than skiing. Like the conditions are hot, the effort is harder for kids. I mean,
it's not just gravity. You don't just point skis down the hill.
Exactly. So our durations are 3 hours in the morning on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And then it's a progression. Like we try to add on each week to different skills. But then we also, like, the bigger picture of it is, trying to cultivate a new generation of trail users to understand their impact that goes beyond themselves in their ride. Like when they're out there, they're impacting other people on the trails and their experience, how they interact with them. They're impacting the trail itself. And so we're just trying to create an awareness in these kids to really cultivate a new generation of trail users that have a better respect for what we have.
So was that mantra, was that something that was in that initial conversation, talking about like, okay, I want to find some way to have something that is not as competitive, or was that something that kind of articulated itself more fully over time?
No, it's definitely something I was like very adamant on day one. There are other programs in our valley that if you want your child to start with just a pure competitive introduction, they have that option too. Okay. Well, I just wanted to provide another option for kids that, not every kid wants to race. And I wanted to provide those kids a space that's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And even if, like you said, even if they do end up racing, the idea that racing is the starting point is incredibly intimidating.
Totally.
And if a race breaks out at one of your camps, like that's awesome, but it's not the entry point to where the kids are coming in expecting like to be towing the line. So you mentioned the first year being rough, and I think it's important to note, like, I want to talk about that, but I think it's also important to kind of ground in, you have 2 sessions, 70 kids, there's a waiting list at 70 kids. Like it would seem like, oh man, to build something like that is you have to cross all the I's and dot all the T's, as we say, like, and it seems like it's an overwhelming chore to get to that point. But I think it's also just as important to talk about the struggles of figuring out how to run this thing and struggle through those things. So let's talk about year one of having something kind of be dumped in your lap that you are super passionate about, but kind of previously had no experience kind of teaching kids and managing all of these different schedules and figuring out those things other than kind of maintaining something for yourself. So like, let's talk us through like year one of getting it stood up, like leading into the actual camp, and then kind of walk us through some stories from year one.
Totally. I mean, it's like a purely learn by fire, which is kind of patterns of my life in general.
Well,
yeah, we're gonna follow that here shortly with our next line of questioning, I think.
You're really good at like jumping off cliffs. No, like it really was just a learn by fire experience. And like my background being in sports medicine, like I was very trained in like emergency care plans and managing groups of people. So like that kind of stuff I was very comfortable with. Applying it to this avenue, the first year was herding cats, like just be honest. Like it was just like a lot of moving pieces and just trying to not lose a kid. Like
Hey, as long as you can outline what job 1 is, then I think jobs 2 through a million fall into place. Don't lose kids. It's a very important rule.
And then so every year after that, I made small changes every year because it's easier to adapt to small changes when you're managing multiple people. And then you learn like those small changes continue to adapt your program in ways that you eventually get to what your sole purpose really was. And I do feel like we are at that now. And I also believe that the pandemic was also like a conduit to that in some sense, because I had to make a lot of rapid changes really quick to get these kids out and outside connecting to nature and in small groups still with their friends versus just isolated in their homes. Like I ran into a parent out on the trail one day, and she had mentioned that, her son I think he was 12 at the time, was already showing signs of depression pretty early on in the pandemic. And I was like, okay, well, we have to do something about this. Like, we need to get these kids outside and we need to get these kids interacting with their friends. And so that's when I launched. Well, first I did this like trail challenge when the rules were like super strict, where you could only be with people in your household. And so like I would be out on the trails and I would create these like, scavenger hunts for kids.
Oh, sweet.
And it's crazy because the trails that like I started kind of small and then I built up, and the kids just went for it. Like 10-year-olds were like deep in our backcountry with their parents. And it's funny because then the parents would be like, oh man, like I've never been out on that trail. Like my kid schlepped me up this huge climb and it was like the best thing ever. So that was a cool thing that came from it. And then from that, the requirements changed. So I just kept, being in touch with what we could do. And just, I'm a big proponent of like, what can we do versus what can't we do? And so at that time, that's when I launched our small groups program. And that was like, I left it up to the parents. Like, you create your group of 3, 4, or 5 kids. So it's up to you who your child is exposed to, even though we're outside and we're doing social distancing and we have buffs, like we do all those things. And so that was a way to get kids out riding bikes with their friends, you know, something besides hanging out with their family all the time on their devices. And that blew up. I first just opened my own schedule up. I was coaching 3 days a week. And then I booked out 6 other coaches. So the demand was there. And then when our large groups opened, I cut it down to 60 kids. And then I like pre-sorted all of the kids, because at this point I've kind of, you know, worked with most of them. And
Yeah, you know their skill level.
yeah, and I kind of know how to feel those things out too, when like parents like super stoked on how great their kid is. And, you know, there's just a way to like kind of like play cards with those kids and get them in groups that's not only going to be fun for them, but also a little bit of challenge. And, you know, there's like a whole psychology behind it. But anyway, so I would pre-sort the kids. And so they're always in that group of 10 with the same coach and the same volunteer in like different drop off pickup locations. So you're always like keeping space with everybody. And in some ways it was a lot more work leading up to it. But then as we ran, I was like, wow, like this is like a well-oiled machine now. Like, because before it's like at one point we had 90 kids per camp. And it was just like, imagine 90 kids on a BMX track getting dropped off for camp.
Yikes.
Yeah. So we'll continue a lot of those same patterns, but then going into next year, I'm a little burnt out from last year of all of the things. And so I recognize that. So I'm learning how to delegate more, and I've hired out a lot more help this year, which also comes with its own challenges, but I'm hoping it's good to delegate. So that's where I'm at now.
Yeah. So I'm interested, because I think the one thing, like you've obviously figured out how to run this thing as a business and take care of these kids and grow these kids in this space. And John mentioned, you know, success stories of these kids, but I want to know, like, have you seen, especially over this last year, as you've gotten into these small groups, is there anything that's really stood out where you've seen these kids become leaders? Because I feel like you've given them the perfect environment to grow as leaders.
Totally. That's interesting you say that. So that I've actually created a volunteer program within the program. So as kids age out of participating in the program, they can volunteer at age, 13 and 14 to then earn a paid job when they're 15 or 16. So that's like,
awesome.
It's like this like full circle, and that's been happening now for a couple years. So it's really cool. Like I'm not going to cry, but like to see these kids just like really earn something and be proud of themselves and doing something that they just love to do. And we just had our coaches training, and that's how I led the training is, like, remember when you were in this camp and you looked up to your coach, you thought that coach was like the coolest person in the world, and anything they did, they were just like, oh, that's so cool. And I'm like, well, now that's you. So to like provide that for kids is like warm fuzzies times 1,000. And it's worth like every like early morning or late evening trying to balance all the things that I try to do. But it's what really like brings it all together. And even to the point of like kids who like we're not like, come to our program to be a fast bike racer, but we see those kids who have that talent, and we point them in the right direction, and we give them the resources that they need to take it however far they need. And we have some great success stories of some pretty successful high school racers that have come through the program. And they're the ones that are waiting for their last teammate to finish to high five them. And it's just, it's really, really sweet.
You're building citizens. You're not just building You're not just building kids who want to go fast and are like, I
Yeah.
gotta go join the US Olympic team. You're building citizens who, regardless of what they do, will understand the legacy of the things that got them there.
I hope. I mean, that's the hope, and I do see it. You know, when you take a step back, and because it's hard when you're just like surviving every day and just staying so busy that you like. I have to remind myself to really like take a step back and take a look at what I've created and the impact that it's had on these lives, and not just like that those success cases like like kids that don't have that healthy influence in their household, and those kids giving them the healthy outlet that they need to maybe just make like one small change, like maybe like a, you know, we teach them about eating their fruits and vegetables, or we teach them about like just trying. Like that's my big thing is too, like I just want everyone to try something once. Like if you can show me that you are going to try to get up this hill, that's all I need. And you'll go a little further next time, or a little
You
bit
might not
further
make
next
it,
time.
but that's okay.
That's
It's
okay.
okay.
Yeah. That and man, like a couple things that I take out of that is it's so for everything that happened 2015 through rolling into the pandemic, with adults fighting with adults and everybody disagreeing and everybody taking their eye off of just we're on team human. We're all on the same team. Like we're all in this together. To see new generations coming up that no, I'm going to wait. Like, yes, I just won this race, whether it's a, you know, high school race, Nike race, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And I can go get my medal, but I want to wait for everybody to finish because this is important to me. That care and that compassion and empathy is just so built into kids that it like kind of makes me wonder at what point does it get beaten out of us as adults that we start to like look at other people as, well, you disagree with me, you're my enemy. But constantly being reminded of it within kids, I'm sure, like, we watch it here like with our Lionhearts, because they have a very similar kind of program where the older kids become mentors to the younger kids, and there is nobody better to coach kids than kids that are a couple years older, because they know more than you do as the coach that's raced all over the world and done just about everything and knows all of the skills inside and out. But that 15-year-old knows more than you do, and that's just the way that it is for a 13-year-old brain.
They know how to use TikTok. That's step one.
Yeah, whatever. Right. I don't know. Whatever. That's just Doug's like weekly plug for he wants a TikTok account for TGL.
I can dance, John. I can dance.
I know you can, but I don't know how that gets people to be interested in a podcast. But whatever. We're getting sidetracked here. But I gotta believe that, like, for you, yes, seeing what you can do for kids and opening them up to new experiences, showing them that, yeah, you can't get up the hill, but that's okay. It's not the end of the world, because life is going to give you plenty of hills, and you're going to get up some of them and you're not going to get up some of them. But as long as you just keep going, like, those skills are so important, and it's so fun and enjoyable to learn them in that sort of environment versus when you've graduated college and you don't have any of those lessons and you learn them by getting fired from a job or whatever the like real life kick in the nuts version of not making it up the hill is. Like, getting those things learned early is so important and so fundamental to creating leaders moving forward in the world. And like, it doesn't, not to say that it doesn't matter if you don't create an athlete, but like, the 1 out of 1,000 people is a mid-level athlete. Like, other people are going to be accountants and lawyers and teachers and things like that, and all of these skills that they are, not that you're necessarily instilling them, that's a lot of burden to put on you, but that they're being able to have exposure to and be challenged in a safe and comfortable way with friends. Like, those are challenges that are way easier learned at 12 and 13 than they are at 23 and 24.
That's exactly right. And like, to your point of, you know, learning these lessons in out of college, like I was raised in a, like, you do it right or you don't do it at all kind of mentality, or you do your best at everything you do, and a bit of a perfectionist upbringing. And So of course there's always that fear of failure that comes along with those qualities. And granted, it's what fueled me to have the successes that I've had. But I wish and I hope what I'm doing for these kids is providing them a safe space to fail and to show them like this is where you learn when you fail. And I look back at my best seasons, like 2016, I did not lose a race at all. Did I learn anything? I learned how to win a race, but like there's a little bit of confidence with that. But then I look at seasons where I fell on my face a lot and I got my ass kicked, and I had injury and I had life things, and that's when I really learned. And I think what really shaped me as not only an athlete but just a human in general. And I think that's what's missed is really advocating those failures. Like that's where you learn the most and where you get shaped as a human.
I cannot agree more. And this year is that, like we were talking about this in the agreement, this year is that for a lot of people, whether they intended it to be or not, right? No one walked into this year and be like, you know what, I am going to have a failure-full life. All these things are going to happen. It's real difficult and it's going to be a blast.
Yeah.
I'm going to get crushed every day. It's going to be awesome.
And there's a lot of things we haven't been able to control for the past 15 months. And a lot of that stuff. And you've had it on every single end over the past year. And I think it's important to acknowledge that, because everyone's going through something different in this space, and we all are, and that's okay. And it is important what we do with the time when we come out the other side there, and what we've learned mentally. We don't have to have accomplished things. You don't have to have written the great novel. You don't have to have done those things, but it's about learning from these experiences. And I really like that that's where you're at in this. So this pandemic year has started with a surgery for you, which now, like, you're sitting like I know your hip works in the way you're sitting currently. Like, you had a massive surgery in the beginning of pandemic, right? Like that was kick things off with a boot. What was going on?
Yeah, I mean, so that was actually my whole 2019. I was ignoring what was going on. And as a certain level of athlete, you get really good at disassociating from your body, basically, and at disassociating from pain. And I've never been good at quite distinguishing good pain from bad pain. Hence like learning how to mountain bike with a broken leg. Like
Right.
I had,
that's the most glaring example.
Yeah, that's a pretty broken GPS. Yeah.
Yeah, my broken navigator for sure in that department. And I so had been ignoring some hip things for a while, but it was what I was experiencing. How I could explain it was, I was like, well, my leg just loses power. Like I'm in my training and in my intervals or in the race, and I get to a point where my leg just shuts down and I don't know what's going on. And the doctors would be like, well, where's the pain? I'm like, well, it doesn't hurt. Like, it's not pain necessarily. It's just this like dead feeling. Like I felt like it would just like, I was like a dead fish, basically, was what my leg would turn into. And I know just enough, I guess, about the human body to be dangerous and to think like I could be the exception to the rule. And I did Moab Rocks, which I actually squeaked out a pretty good result, which results don't indicate like, oh, she's injured, she's not injured. That was just, pushing through something. And then I tried to race Crusher. I mean, I had a series of bad races. And in those series of bad races, in my mindset at the time, I was like, well, I'm just not training hard enough. I need to train harder. I need to push myself more, which then just like obviously didn't make my leg just come back. And then I tried to come back to racing again. I took a break, tried to come back. And I did Crusher, which the year prior, like, was a great race for me. Like, I, was at the front up until the end. And that year I tried to do it, I couldn't even make it up the first climb. So there was a bit of like back and forth and denial and thinking like, oh, well, maybe I just don't want to race anymore. Maybe I just don't have the want anymore. So I took a long break and just, but then I finally went in and got it looked at. And I can remember sitting in the doctor's office, and it was actually a buddy of mine that I know from undergrad who now is an ortho up here, which is also super weird. But I'm sitting there with his hip guy, and we're looking at the X-rays, and it's glaringly obvious that I have like this huge bone growth that then like is indicative of other things that are going on in my hip. And I'm looking at it and I'm seeing it, but then I'm like, oh, well, it's not that big. Like, sorry to waste your time. We'll talk to you guys later. And I still remember like the look on his face of just like, who is this girl? Like, what is like
Don't mind me. I'm just going through the stages of denial. It's okay. I'll go
Yeah.
through them at my own pace.
Yeah. And I even ran. So that was in Summit County, which is over Vail Pass from here. And I stopped on the pass and ran a peak before coming back because I was
Yes, you
still so wired of like, this isn't happening. Like, and that's just how I, at the time, coped with adversity. I just pushed myself until I couldn't feel feelings anymore, which is, real fun when you learn these negative qualities about yourself. But that's what got me to the point of surgery. And I had to kind of wait a long time for insurance purposes. Go America for great insurance. But but I went in, and what they thought was going to be like a standard 2-hour procedure was a 6-hour procedure, which just took a lot longer to recover from. So that's how my 2020 started, going in thinking like, oh, this is going to just be a quick fix. It's pretty standard. I'll be back on the bike in, 6 weeks, to a procedure that was much bigger than anticipated. And then therefore the recovery was much bigger. But lucky for me, it ran right into the pandemic when everybody had a break.
Yeah, but here's the thing. You just said this. You just said, "Oh, I just would be like, oh no, I'm just go cope with this and like I'll just push myself harder. That's how I deal with things."
Yeah.
You don't have that option anymore. And now all the other things, you're laid up because you've got to deal with this and you've got to recover, and you're dealing with other things like interpersonal relationships. And now you're here, you're at home, and you have to deal with the fact that your coping mechanism of pushing yourself hard has been ripped out from underneath you.
Yeah.
What does that do in that space?
It's kind of debilitating and very overwhelming, but also unavoidable. Like, it gives you no place to run. Like, I had no choice but to take a real deep look at how I was living my life and, at my relationships, and what was I living in the way that best served me, and was I really happy? And, it makes you ask all those like bigger questions that you're just frankly too busy to answer before. Like, I mean, I was traveling most weekends. I was still working, I was working, a pretty normal job, and then doing the kids camp. And I was keeping myself really busy from having to really see like what needed to change in my life.
So when things shut down and you're shut down, kind of walk us through like that process, because I'm sure that there was additional pushback in terms of the like suck it doctor, like run to run the peak thing after the meeting. I'm sure there was some other kind of fight or flight moments along the way before you actually kind of had to sit down and take stock of where you were, kind of not only for yourself but where you sat in relation to all of the things and all of the people around you.
Yeah, I mean, I was running up until the night before surgery. Like, I still, like, the night before surgery, I ran with Piney on some trails that I had. Like, yeah, I mean, I was keeping myself extremely distracted, literally up until the last moment before surgery. So, you come out of surgery 6 hours, and that's a lot of drugs, and it takes a while just to recover from that. And And I couldn't move around a lot, and I had to rely on other people, and I had to learn how to ask for help. And it kind of shined a light on things that were missing in my home life that are pretty necessary for me for a sustainable relationship. And so that's when, my marriage kind of took a little bit of a decline and has since ended. But, I can look back and thank God all that happened, because I truly believe both of us are going in a better direction that is best suited for us.
Well, right, and I think it's easy to point like at this like juncture of these things we're talking about. It's easy to say like, well, it started surgery. That's where it started. But really, what we're talking about here is like, this is like these crops were planted a long time ago, and all of the stuff that both you and probably him as well were doing, were kind of patching or like holding those things at bay. And when you remove a lot of those distractions, it's like kind of are left with just like, this is what this thing is.
Totally. And, I have to say, like, where we were up until, like, I would say my athlete identity was no longer, in some sense, it was what I needed. It was what we both needed. But then when that stops, it really makes you take check of like, I don't think we can do this for the rest of our life. And I don't think I want to do this for the rest of my life. So what else is there? And it was mostly for me to realize that like I needed something else, that, I don't want to race bikes for the rest of my life. Like, there's so many other things out there that I want to do, that in some sense I was living kind of a limited scope. So this past year, gives you a lot of time to take inventory of how you're living, and is this how you want to always be living, and what needs to change. And I made a lot of those changes last year.
There's something to be said for right sizing the world around you, and sometimes the relationships around you. It doesn't mean that they weren't good in the space they were in.
Right.
It doesn't mean that the people engaged in those relationships, whether they're friends or family or partners, whether they were wrong or right at that specific time, but things change, and it is okay to be in a different place. But it is interesting how when all of this stuff gets stripped away, we start to get to the place where we have to confront ourselves, right? And, my relationship with John, or my relationship with Ellen, or my relationship with my parents or whomever has a whole hell of a lot more to do with me.
Exactly.
Than it actually has to do with him. Like with any of the people around, right? A lot more to do with how I deal with things.
That was
necessarily them.
That was so much what I was going to say is I think when, and Amanda and I experience this too, just like everybody experiences when you're in that quarantine life. Like we made jokes about it week after week. Welcome back to the quarantine studios. But when you're in that life that is very, very small, it really puts a light on, am I, me, in my specific sphere of influence and the things that are important to me? Am I manifesting the things around me that I want and I need for myself, versus am I bringing those things to me to make somebody else happy, or because I don't want to upset somebody else, or I don't want to mention the D word to my friends or my family, or whatever stigma is around it, or I don't want to acknowledge that things aren't as they seem on Instagram. And I'm really hopeful, and I've said this before on the show, that I'm hopeful people come out of the pandemic more compassionate, more empathetic to mental health issues, to physical health issues, to a lot of the things that had very, very sharp, we'll call them surgical lights on them in 2020. And I think you're such a perfect example of somebody that was put in a situation that had to kind of acknowledge what was going on, but also took it on head on. And you're here telling us like, I had unhealthy coping mechanisms for how I dealt with these things. And I had to do a lot of this work myself. It wasn't, it was everybody else's problem. I'm beautiful, I'm perfect, I'm amazing. It's always somebody else's fault. Like, you're taking a lot of
John, you are beautiful and perfect and
Thank you.
amazing.
Yes, thank you.
Just letting you know.
Body positive here.
Yeah.
But it's very much like acknowledging the reality of the situation and figuring out what Karen needs versus what Karen thinks the world wants for her, if that makes sense.
Oh, completely. I mean, it was a whole year of introspection. Like in a lot of ways, I look back, I'm so grateful for that isolation because it gave me no choice but to work on myself and to ask those hard questions of like, what do I really want? What does make me happy? Like, you know, who am I when I'm not an athlete and I'm not the owner of this, you know, kids camp, and the things that, you know, get you on podcasts and all of that, like strip all of that away and what's there. And those are the things that, the ongoing questions that I hope most people are asking themselves, to just always be true to what their passions are and what lights them up, and doing things for themselves and not for what other people think they should be doing. And in a lot of ways, that's the direction I was going. Like, a lot of the decisions I was making and the things I was doing were reflections of what I thought sponsors wanted me to do and what I thought would be better for my husband and I, and what I thought would be better for my career. And then this whole year, I just dropped all that. And I was like, well, what can I give that resonates more with who I am? And that doesn't need to get recognized, because if I'm happy and if I'm interacting with my community and my friends and being an example of just living your life the way that's right for you, that's enough, because that has an impact. And so I hope a lot of people have been asking those questions, and, you know, not just distracting themselves, and because it's easy. We all do it, whether it's effort, drugs, alcohol, you know, however severe your coping mechanisms are, your phone, who isn't
TikTok, whatever.
Yeah. What'd you say? TikTok? Yeah,
whatever.
exactly.
Just saying TikTok.
Yeah. I tried to like really strip away every distraction and every coping mechanism and learn how to like really just be with myself and to really be lonely too. Like, there's nothing wrong with being lonely.
So
it's an emotion. It's an emotion.
Yeah. So, okay. So this is where I kind of want to ask, in this process, did you go about it solo or did you seek out external help?
I definitely sought out extra help. And it actually started during hip surgery. So I have this friend, I lived in the Bay Area for a hot minute, basically lived out of my Jeep. That's a whole nother story. And I have this friend from there who is a yoga teacher and a mentor. And she has been trying to get me to like join her groups forever. And I've always been too busy and had all the excuses, which is so funny looking back, because it's just a way to like distract you from yourself, like pushing things like that off. Like, I don't want to talk about me. I don't want to talk about my feelings. I don't want to talk about those things. Like, I'm going to keep myself super busy.
Yeah, that's what weak people do.
That's what weak people have feelings, which is obviously not true. So finally it just serendipitously lined up where like I was on crutches for 8 weeks and her program was 8 weeks long. And so that's when it started. And it was this group of women from all over the world that, you know, it was like a deep dive every week into some kind of topic about your spirituality or mental health, or and it really just laid the framework of like, whoa, like I'm really missing these other quadrants of my life. And so then that program kind of led into another program that I'm a pretty spiritual person, and it was definitely a quadrant that was being suppressed how I was living before. And so then I started this other program that was, it was started by, she's a nurse practitioner who is also an energy healer. And she works along the chakra systems. So it was every Sunday, it was a 2-hour practice where like former me was like, oh yeah, 2 hours of yoga, this is gonna be sick. And no, it's like 2 hours of breath work and like the most like drawn out, slow. It was completely what I needed and everything that I've avoided for so long, because it just completely resets your neurological system. And having worked at such a high, like, alert state for so long, like I had no idea how much needed to get reset until doing that. What's that?
I said, oh, I'm just like, I'm
Yeah, I
processing.
think we're both just like chewing on all of this right now.
Yeah, I know. It's interesting having these conversations now in a more cycling heavy audience, because it can make some people uncomfortable, but I think that's good to make people uncomfortable.
I mean, what is like, if we haven't covered that part of cycling yet, like if you're not struggling at some point, like are you really doing it? Like we glorify it in this sport.
Yeah.
We do. And then so like this side of your health is learning how to be uncomfortable in that calmer state. So it's like, so we're really, as cyclists, we're really good at being uncomfortable when we're exerting ourselves and we're hurting ourselves. And I've learned the most this last year by reversing that and being really good to my body and being really good to my mind and giving it the nourishment that it needed that I never let it before. Cause I was like, oh, well, if I'm just like breathing for 2 hours, like that's just like, I should be out on my bike, or I should be running, or I should be doing this. And but it allowed like this deeper level of healing that I didn't even know I could access.
It's so fascinating that like really you've stripped so much away this year from yourself, but you've given yourself some other things back. That's what I'm hearing you say. It's like, okay, I've taken all these things that I've built up that are my coping mechanisms and the things that I thought were the most important freaking things.
Right. Like this fabricated identity person.
Yeah, I've built all this stuff up. But what I've done this year is I've just basically sandblasted everything. I'm down to bare metal. But what I've done is I've found a different space within myself. And I think it's frightening for people sometimes to approach that, right? I walked back from cycling hard this past year for a number of different reasons. And it was important for me to, because now I'm approaching it in a different way and I'm walking into it in a very different way. And that's good for me in a number of ways. And I think there's no shame in that. And I think so many people felt like this pandemic is the opportunity for me to become fast and strong and and maybe that isn't where they need to be putting their effort and time. And maybe it is, but for you, I love that it is this different type of reset. How do you feel now that like the world is reopening and you have this kind of whole different, like quite clearly a different Karen than we started out with when we walked in?
And a different house and like all of these material things in addition to yourself are brand new.
Right.
Yeah. I tried to like, with all of that, like energetic work that I've done this last year, like you create a toolbox, right? Like I, initially like going into Unbound this weekend, I'm like, oh my gosh, it's going to be so many people. And it's going to be like, rehashing all the same conversations that I've already had and like having to like explain like, what happened and what I'm doing. And
it's like social anxiety.
Well, or anxiety. We'll just give you a Bitly link and we'll print it on a business card for you for this episode. And then you can be like, here, go
listen. I don't want to
download. I don't want to do this again.
But like, but what this last year has taught me is like, take a breath, just take a breath and, approach every conversation with an open heart and honesty. And I'm going to be just fine no matter what. And I don't have to defend myself and I don't have to like come back with being like, oh yeah, I feel so strong now. And like, I'm going to kick ass. And like, cause that's just your ego, right? Like that's just your ego needing a little bit of chest bumping. And I don't need that anymore. Like, and that's not how I'm returning to riding. Like this whole last year, I've come back to like that initial like love of riding. And And I've kind of just dropped those like performance expectations in some sense. And um, I'm doing it for me and nobody else. And so like the best thing of like things opening is that we do get to connect with everybody again.
Yeah.
I'm so excited just to see people again. And I've seen people in like smaller groups, and I've did a little bit of traveling into like smaller, opportunities to connect with people. And I'm like, wow, like I'm going to be around like thousands of people again. And what a great opportunity to use everything I've learned this past year in these situations versus feeling like you have to like, talk about your power numbers or, whatever. Like we used to talk, I don't know. This is my opportunity to really just be me.
There's something interesting in what you said. Actually, two things interesting that
there's lots of interesting things.
Yes, but like two things that I'm going to pull out of that is what, like Doug and I's personal experiences. We've been lucky enough to be able to ride with a lot of the guests that we've had on the show, and some of the charity work and things like that we've done. Is it's being able to have the experience of riding with a pre-retirement and then a post-retirement Jeremy Powers, who had already won national championships, had already really kind of established himself as this is what my legacy is going to be. When we rode with him, I got 0 sense of having that ego of like, I need to flex, I need to do this, I need to talk about, what my current FTP is or anything like that other cyclists,
right,
whatever the category is, like to measure each other against. And I'm using that very, very specifically. That cyclists love to measure themselves about.
Well, I would say it's a conversation that cyclists are just comfortable talking about. Like that's the realm that they just, and that's totally fine.
It's easy to understand. It's also like you were saying, it's an easy way to like, the watts that I can put out are higher than Doug's, but that I also weigh like 40 pounds more than he does. So like, it depends on like, how do you want to flex really?
Whenever you stop at a rest stop on a trail, an old guy's like, how many miles you doing today? And you're like, I don't know. I did 20. They were at like a million. My heart rate was at 185. Like, oh man, you did 100 at heart rate 135. Right. Like it does like, but it's the thing that we talk about because it's the only thing we have to measure things by.
And where I'm going with this is like, some of those folks that we've been privileged to ride with they've kind of crested over that point of like, I don't need to do that anymore. Like I don't have to, like I've flexed and I've got jerseys and I have trophies and things like that. But the other thing to that is like for you in terms of like the roller coaster of life is you're going into Unbound this year as you can go be Karen. Like you can go be an unvarnished version of yourself that is probably in the last 15 years the most like true to who you are and what you want. And it makes all of those conversations so much easier because you can actually be present in those conversations and not feel like, okay, am I saying the right thing to this person to make them, want to sponsor me or to impress that person with my accomplishments, or did I live up to the expectations of what they maybe had when they came up to talk? Like any of that, like weird neuroses things that like people like myself with social anxiety get when you are around a large group of people like that. Like it becomes a lot easier when you're just like, like Doug said, he stripped all the paint away and I've got some rust spots and I've got like all my body panels aren't straight anymore and it's okay. Like everything's fine. And regardless of what the physical outcome is of the event this weekend, like you're still solid. Like that piece of you and that kind of sense of self is still solid.
Totally. Yeah, exactly. In some sense, it's like a litmus test too, to be like, well, do I want to keep doing this?
Yeah.
Which I do think I definitely do, because even today, like on like my last little tune-up ride, I like had all those feelings come back and like, oh yeah, like I definitely still want to be doing this. And that took a while, and it just happened today. And I was like, wow, like I feel like, my physical self from from some of my best seasons. But like with this new sense of like not putting too much pressure on myself, which I think is a great combination. Like even like I'm doing the 100 and I'm refraining from saying I'm just doing the 100 because I don't think anyone should devalue whatever they're lining up for. And I felt a lot of pressure to do the 200 because that's the premier event of the weekend, and that's what gets all the media attention, and that's what everyone likes to talk about. But then people want to talk about the 350 because that's the next big thing, and I'm like, you know what, there's always going to be something bigger. But is that what you should be doing? Like, is that what you want to be doing?
And
there's my bike that long.
And there are going to be be so many people lining up for that 100 that are terrified that this is the biggest accomplishment that they've done yet on a bike, and it's probably going to be the biggest accomplishment that they ever aspire to do on a bike. So it's like it's all about calibration. And I'm going to insert something here real quick because I sent this to Doug earlier, and in honor of not taking yourself too seriously, for anyone that wants to go back and find Karen's post from Tuesday, go back and find her post from doing intervals. That horse was really, really proud of the intervals that you did.
Yeah,
that was so funny. I was like, I gotta take a picture of that.
He really liked your intervals.
Yeah, he was stoked. Like, if I were a horse, I'd probably be that stoked too.
I mean, I feel like that's a pretty cool job to have, be a horse. Yeah, pretty much.
It would be a pretty good, cool job. Yeah. I would hope most people who really know me know that I don't take myself super seriously.
But so you're going into this, right? You have this whole different perspective. What are you most excited about going and doing Unbound this weekend? Like, what's the thing that doesn't have crap to do with the race, or any of that? What is the thing you're most stoked about for the weekend?
My dad's coming. My dad has never been to a bike race.
That's bananas.
That is wild in and of itself.
Yeah, I mean, to his credit, like he is he works really hard. He has a very busy schedule. So I don't my dad's never been to a bike race. I'm more like, oh, my dad gets to come to a bike race. Like,
also, to be very clear, spectating most bike races is pretty garbage. Unless it's like a track race or a short track race, it's not always a great. They're like, oh, there she goes out of the woods.
I know.
Like 6 hours.
Yep, exactly.
Bye. But Canyon, the bike company I race for, they are providing race support, and he's going to tag along with them. So it's going to be so cool, which is super cool because my dad actually used to work on a dirt track pit crew growing up. I was like the little girl that was underneath the car holding the flashlight. So we've always had like a great relationship. He's went to all my sporting events growing up. So I'm, in some sense, I'm like, well, this is going to be so cool for him because it's like kind of him like reliving his like pit crew days of, even if he just like hands me a bottle, I'm gonna be like, oh, this is so sweet.
So do you think this is your dad's kind of backhanded way to getting into being a race mechanic now? Is this like what his retirement job's gonna be? Like, he's like, well, here's the deal.
He can figure out bikes. I know. I have this I think it'd be so cool to like travel around to races with my dad.
I back this. We are here to support this. Tell him we said so and that we think it's a good retirement career.
Yeah. And when you see him at one of the stops, you're gonna have to ask for an air pressure change in the front and around a wedge, and then just watch him smile. And that's
exactly.
Yeah.
The rear is getting a little loose. We got to get up on the cushion here. So
we need to get off the corner a little better.
I don't even care how I do, just to be able to share that with my dad. It's going to be pretty cool.
That's awesome. Those are the things I think as we continue to we're all of similar age, as we continue to get older, those experiences with our families and the people that we have in our life, it's really important to have those spaces and make those memories, and those sort of things are awesome. Well, we will certainly be watching you in your unbound things. You're about to hit the road here in
I have Flow Sports, so I could actually follow this. Like I am super pumped that showed up on my feed earlier this week. Is like, yeah, we're still trying to figure out how we're going to cover it, but we're going to cover it. So I am excited that I have Flow Sports and I'm able to follow this.
That's so cool.
I'll be over at John's house.
Well, and then you can also follow like every bike company's Instagram account will be doing updates all weekend. Like I know Canyon will be doing a bunch of updates. Sure. So there's that too.
So everybody, all you pebbles, make sure you go and follow Karen just in general, because she's a great follow on the world of the internet. But also follow her race progress this weekend. Things kick off on Saturday, and it should be a really good time in general. And we've got local hero Scott Herman is out there going to be doing this. Lots of people, including Amanda Panda and a number of people who have been on this show, are going to do all forms of this race. It's kind of exciting. We're going to be cheering for all our friends just to go do the thing and enjoy yourselves and have a good time out there. But we always like to close on one last thing, because we've talked about a whole bunch of different stuff and this has been an absolute blast. But our question that we always like to end on is this: if you wanted to give something to the Pebbles, our faithful listeners, all because we are all pebbles in the gravel lot of life. If you want the Pebbles to take one thing home from today, Karen, what would you want them to take home?
Oh man, that's a big question, really.
Well, you can come back and we can talk again, so you can always have another whack at the tree.
Yeah.
Here.
I would hope that everyone listening in kind of moves forward with doing what they really want to do, not what they like see on Instagram and what they think they should be doing on the bike, or what they, like they should be doing this many miles or like this fast, and like to really take inventory of their own personal desires on the bike or whatever that is, and to follow that versus what you're being fed sometimes to believe what you should be doing. So I think that would be the main messaging of follow your inner desires versus what it is necessarily marketed to you.
I like that challenge because it's
succinct, and I back it.
It's difficult. It's not.
Sure. I mean, I work in marketing, like.
Right. She's like, here's my thing, make me obsolete.
Right. Yeah.
Well, and I have to say too, so I have a new job and it's actually in PR, and I feel really fortunate to have the clients I do, because none of it feels forced. Like,
that's good.
Like I feel and even the marketing I did for Ergon, like it's a brand that I believed in, and I feel fortunate to be in that sector and to be able to work in an authentic way. But I am in that sector. So I do see other companies in other places like having a different approach. So that's why I like to emphasize, see things for yourself and not what you think other people think you should be doing.
I love it. I love
it. That sentence right there applies on a whole host of levels right now.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Well, dude, Karen, this has been absolutely amazing. Like what an absolute blast to do this with you. Pebbles, all of you Pebbles, thanks for joining us this week. We can't do this without y'all. Like, we don't make this show to just throw it into the void. So thank you all for being here. Make sure to subscribe, follow, and engage. Click the like button. Follow us over on thegravelot.com. All the information and stuff we're doing there is open to you. Become a Patreon supporter today. We'd love to have you aboard. And if, as we've said before, if you want to become like the shiniest pebble in the gravel lot, send us your suggestions. We got one during the show, someone we need to have on the show. So we will get into the DMs on Instagram and start working on these things. If you've got folks you know who are awesome doing diverse and cool things in your region, please share them with us. We'd love to have them on the show. We are booking deep into the season now. It is summertime. Everybody's out on their bikes, but you need something to listen to while you do it. And we want to bring that to your ears. So get the people in your community connected with us, and we will make it happen.
So as Doug said, without you guys, and I question whether pebbles can be shiny or not. Like, can they?
Sure, yeah. A whole river goes over them a whole bunch, John.
Erosion, shiny, polish. Got it. So without you guys, we simply couldn't keep bringing this stuff to you guys each and every week. But in addition to you guys supporting the show, we really encourage you guys to slide on over to our partners who assist in sharing TGL with really the world. Different partners for different reasons, but honestly, all of these folks are like our family. And as Karen was just saying, every single one of the things that we are getting ready to say, we're saying them because we believe in them, and we would not be telling you guys about these brands if we didn't wholeheartedly believe in their products. So show them some love, thank them for supporting their show, buy their products, support them, or just send them a message saying, hey, thanks for supporting things that I care about.
That's good. Even if you don't need new kit, just go over to Beefy Ride Bikes and send them a note and say, hey, Adam, you guys have been supporting Doug and John for the past 3 years. Like, we really appreciate that. And now you may not need new kit, but Adam will appreciate hearing that. But if you do need new kit, go see Beefy Ride Bikes. Go over to their website, bfrbcycling.com. Check out all their awesome custom stuff that they can do, or stuff that's off the rack. Brilliant designs. Really just, I cannot tell you how amazing their kit is. Everybody I know who has ridden their stuff is absolutely blown away by the quality. Go check them out and see how they can get you all set up for 2021 this summer, this fall, as we continue to roll into post-pandemic life.
And if you are a fan of coffee, which I guess as a cyclist, I feel like it's almost like it's a mandatory.
It's unacceptable if
like, are you a cyclist if you don't like coffee of some sort?
Even decaf.
Yeah, we're broad brushes right now, people. But regardless, if you are somebody who does like coffee, you probably are somebody who likes really good coffee, and there is nothing better than Grimpour Brothers coffee. Follow the link in our show notes. Head to grimpourBrothers.com now. Check out all of the amazing blends that they have, and you can read about each one of them, where the beans come from, how they're roasted, and also the coolest part about what Dan and Grimpour is doing is part of the proceeds from each and every one of those bags goes to some sort of cause, whether that is an athlete, whether that's an event, or it's just a cause. These are things that is truly putting your money where your mouth is, while also making an amazing product. So every morning now that I'm back home, I am able to make Grimpour Brothers coffee again, because I did not take it with me. I felt like that was one line too far in terms of packing for a week away from my house. But now that I am back home, I am excited to wake up every day and grind fresh beans of coffee and have incredible cups of coffee. So head to grimpourbrothers.com now. And don't forget that if you guys subscribe to the coffee subscription service, you will get one bag of coffee each year for free.
Absolutely. Also, a massive thanks to Mitch at Bi-Wheels Fit Studio and Workshop right here in Cincinnati, Ohio, offering you a full host of bike fitting services intended to provide the cycling enthusiast, which I don't know if you know, Pebbles, is actually you.
Yeah, that's y'all.
You're a cycling enthusiast with the most efficient, comfortable, and sustainable bike fit you've ever had. He's got bikes from all over the place, gear, whatever you need. Go see Mitch at BioWheels. We heartily support him right up the road here in Madera.
I think that's the most important thing. He has bikes.
He has bikes.
He has bikes.
Right now.
Like, he has like real bikes.
Tangible things.
Bike-shaped bikes.
Yeah. Get them. Can't get them anywhere else.
Yes. And we are also supported by the Ritual All Natural Skincare, which is, you guys should know by now, they are one of our first sponsors. That is the company that I started back in 2014. It is small batch handmade chamois cream using locally sourced all natural ingredients. So think shea butter, kokum butter, beeswax, vegetable oils, things like that, things that your body actually knows what to do with and can actually nourish your skin rather than just petroleum nonsense that sits on top of your skin and doesn't get absorbed by anything and messes with your endocrine system. So this is all being custom blended right here in Cincinnati. And the coolest part about what the Ritual is doing is it can be customized specifically for everything about whether it's you, your team, your shop. You can get custom labels, you can get custom packaging, you can choose what it smells like, you can choose whether it's cooling or not cooling. Like everything about this product is able to be customized, and I am very proud of the recipe. It is easily good for Unbound. Even if you want to do the 200, one application will keep you happy for 200 miles.
Especially the way I
Kansas.
slather it on. It's basically like buttering a bagel. I just like as much as I can
Schmear,
get on.
the proper schmear. So you guys can contact us today, Doug and myself, if you want to figure out how to order this, and we will put you in contact with the folks at The Ritual and get your orders started.
Absolutely. And also, finally, last but definitely not least, our great friends at Hand Up. I'm wearing their jorts right now, as I will be all summer, because jorts are back. And if you need anything outside of jorts, I don't know, like gloves or jerseys, they have new tees, new tank tops, like super nice, awesome stuff. Go check out Hand Up Gloves. They are protecting our paws and should be protecting yours as we roll into the new season. Hand Up's been fantastic. Go click the link in our show notes, or this code will not work for you. Click the link in the show notes and enter code Pebble $. So Pebbles, but with a $sign at the end. And you can save yourself up to 10% off everything in store, including their Gloves for Good, where they're giving back money to causes that matter. And it is awesome to have partners that are doing that sort of thing, like Hand Up and Grimpor, people who are putting money back into the communities that support them. So thanks to Hand Up. Go check them out. We are very appreciative for them.
I just thought of two things while you were doing that.
Yeah.
So Pebble $sign is like your guys' rapper name. All of our listeners,
That's
it's like your rapper name.
yeah, but that's like we just need to get gold chains with the like Pebble $sign. I'll get some made. Make a note.
And then the other thing is like our TikTok is just you dancing in jorts. That's what it is. It's done.
With the gold chain.
Oh yeah. See, this is what happens with groupthink. Yeah,
and some gold fronts.
We are totally building a camel right now. I love it.
This isn't a camel. This can it's gonna be a weird channel, but it can happen.
Hey, whatever.
Like, we'll have to play which song do we do? The Russian song, or do we do the?
I think you do whatever you want.
All right, cool. All right, I'm
Whatever
working.
you feel
I'm gonna
like.
workshop this. I'm gonna workshop.
I like it. All right, so we've said it before. We love hearing from you guys. So make sure to visit, subscribe to all the social feeds, hit thegravelot.com, stay in touch, stay up to date. Join the live streams every Tuesday, 6:30 p.m. Eastern. What is it? Daylight time, Eastern, whatever. Eastern.
I don't know.
Cincinnati time, like it's whatever
Eastern.
time. Eastern. Yes. We're on YouTube and Facebook live. You can also go to Streamlabs there if you want to check us out there. But regardless, like just engage with us, engage with our guests, send us your contact submissions, send us notes on social media, whatever. Like this is like, let's make this two-way conversation, not just us talking at you and then you guys hearing it and not doing anything. That seems weird.
It's okay. We love you anyways, even if you're just listening. That's okay. Sometimes you just got to absorb. But I hope you're absorbed this week.
At some point, longtime listener, first time caller.
Right.
Challenge out to everybody.
Challenge. Be a first time caller. Call the number 513-400-5577.
Nice. You did it without memory. Yes, that's good.
That's how it works. I'm channeling.
I'm very proud of you.
Thank you very much. Also, a massive thanks to Wadaboy for our intro and outro music. Check him out. Links in the show notes. Dude, Karen, she sat here through all of our ad read, which is exceptional. And she's like antsy to get on the road. I know for sure. First off, best of luck this weekend.
Yes.
Have an absolute blast. Give your dad a hug from the gravel lot. Like, I don't know if it means anything to him, but tell him we're rooting for him. And if he wants to ever talk dirt cars, he can talk to John.
I am his people.
His name is John. So there you go.
Even
Perfect.
better.
John and John. It's like synergy. So
Yeah. Yeah, if we were like 6-year-old kids, we have so many things in common right now.
Yeah.
It's like you have a race car, I want a race car. We
Perfect.
talk about race cars. Let's
But
do
thank
this.
you for joining us. Really appreciate
Yes.
you taking time, especially out of this busy schedule where you're trying to make things happen. So thank you very much. And also thanks to your most amazing dog, Piney, for showing up and being such a sweetheart.
He's a good boy.
Well, what a
I
good-
like that he made an appearance halfway through and none of us talked about him. That he had his head just sitting there chilling, being a good boy.
good boy.
Sometimes.
But
They're
thank
all
you,
the
Karen.
goodest
We
boys.
really appreciate you being here for sure.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So that's all for this week, Pebbles. So be sure to subscribe, follow, and engage because, as you know, decisions and trails are made by those who show up. So if we don't see you on the trails this week, we'll see you next time. Bye, John.
Bye, Doug.
Thank you.